2 years ago, I attended my first conference like this, hosted by a head. And during that time, I wanted in particular to see a gentleman by the name of Gene Kim. You might have heard of him. Gene is a well-known author and expert on DevOps. I, at the time, not really so much. I was an expert on DevOps. I like to think I was an expert on something, but not DevOps. At any rate, I wanted to come and learn a little bit more about it. And so I sat through the session, and Gene talked a lot about companies that were doing some really amazing things with improving their time to market on applications and that sort of thing. In particular, he discussed companies like Netflix, who were going from these large monolithic releases that were a couple of times a year or every so many months to multiple releases a day. There was an underlying theme in Gene's conversation, or in his presentation, about the infrastructure, the tools, and the process that needed to be there before you could really get to this DevOps model that Netflix had really reached. And so that got me to thinking. So the first thing I did after I left the event that evening was I downloaded Gene's book. He's written several. The one I got was The Phoenix Project. And if you haven't read it, it is a great book. I will tell you that the stories in there were a little too close to home, and I may or may not have had a little bit of heart palpitation during some of the discussions. The incidents were a little too close to home. I'm sure you can all relate. But so after I read that, then I got to thinking about my own organization and how we needed to change. I was running a primarily operational organization that was doing a lot of support work, and we were also responsible for the instrumentation of applications. And you know, I was suddenly starting to realize that we were that bottleneck that Gene talked a lot about in his books. So what I wanted to do then is talk to you today about how we kind of moved from bottleneck to where we are today as beginning to be enablers for a DevOps approach at United. Before I get too deep into it, obviously you're familiar with United's business. We're an airline, we fly all over the world, but the scale of it may not be something that you're familiar with. Every day we make a promise to about 500,000 people that we'll get them from point A to point B, and we'll get them there with their luggage. Sounds like a pretty basic promise. I'm sure if you've flown us, that's just an expectation. But we have to do this 4,500 times a day. We've got to do it to 337-ish airports. That fluctuates here and there depending on the season. And we've got to do it to the tune of across 5 continents with a very carefully choreographed group of 86,000 employees worldwide. And last year, we did that for 143 million passengers. Now, all this isn't possible without the support of 150, it's actually getting closer to 200 mission-critical applications. And United, by our leadership team, is often referred to as a technology company with wings, because the processes and the scale of our operation wouldn't be possible without all of these apps. And they do things that you're familiar with, things like the mobile app that you might check into the flight with, or a kiosk, or the computers that the gate agents use to check you in for the flight. But there's also a lot of the back office items like flight planning, weight and balance, fuel planning, crew tracking, maintenance, and then the usual business type apps that are important for us to report revenue and that sort of thing. And so we needed to be able to keep these instrumented and respond to them quickly. So back in 2015, as I had just come out of Looking Ahead 15, I looked at a tool set that we'd outgrown. We'd made a very significant investment in a set of tools which had a large combination of challenges. All of our apps, when we made changes and did releases, required a significant amount of time to instrument. And that really did lead to a problem that affected our agility and our ability to release apps quickly and keep the level of monitoring that was there. We had problems with data gaps. Tools that were supposed to tell us how apps were performing would have agent problems, agents would crash, and so there was a lack of trust in those tools over time. And probably one of the bigger problems that was a little more subtle was that we had too many clicks to the answer in many cases. There were too many times where users had to take too long to figure out how to get to the answer rather than just getting to it easily through a couple of clicks. And so we didn't have great tool adoption. So I mentioned all this was going on, and we were talking with some folks about different tools that were available. And then along came these two guys. Now, we had talked backstage a few minutes ago about lowering Brian Dempsey from the ceiling, but we were afraid he'd fall. Brian, along with Mike Ruffner, who's our account executive from AppDynamics, came in and showed me a little introduction about what AppDynamics could do for me. And I'll tell you, I was pretty skeptical. I'd seen a lot of demos. The tool set that I had came with a lot of amazing demos, and I always thought of it sort of like the Wrigley scoreboard. You know, if you go to Wrigley and you're not paying attention, those numbers just kind of magically change. But that magic goes away when you look up there and you see that there's some poor guy sweating himself to death, turning numbers every so often when the score changes. And that's sort of how I felt a lot of these demos went. You know, you'd see these amazing things happen in a demo, and then you'd get it in your own shop, and it didn't work the way you wanted it to. Well, Brian and Mike proved me wrong with AppD, and so I thought, all right, maybe there's a new generation of tools out here that we really need to look at and change our strategy. So we went through and started looking at all of the APM tools, and we had several requirements based on our existing problems. Certainly implementation and time to market was one of them. We needed something that was a low maintenance effort. I didn't want to have a team that had to focus most of its time running the tool. I wanted them to focus on instrumentation, engineering new ways to monitor, that sort of thing. I also wanted something that was quick to the answer, quick clicks to the answer, as I say. And ultimately, it needed to have something that was easily adoptable by a broad group of people. Because without that, then I've got shelfware, and I didn't want that. From a partner perspective, I think most of these are obvious probably to most of you. Competitive pricing, obviously. We wanted a market leader in APM. If we're going to make a big change, let's do it right. I wanted a partner that understood my challenges as a business and understood my business. And I wanted a partner that would be interested in what I needed beyond the sale. If you've been paying attention, you'll figure out that we selected AppD. We have quite a partnership with them now, and we're about 1.5 years old, maybe 2 years if you count the world's longest proof of concept that I'm sure my account rep would love to tell you about. But we finalized that deal in 2016. We did a SaaS solution, and we initially rolled out Java, .NET, end-user monitoring, and some database visibility. We also experimented a little bit with analytics, which we continue to do today to a broader scale. So we got a really nice partnership started off right away. And some of the biggest reasons we chose AppD were it's easy to use. It's a web-based product. There's no GUI to distribute to my end users. It was a market leader, et cetera. I won't bleed all of the slides. But again, they've been amazing partners for us since then. So now we've signed the agreement, and now it's time to get to work. My team's here, and I'm sure that when they saw the initial amount of applications I wanted to instrument, well, I'm not sure I know, they were ready to kill me, right? We had a pretty big ask, 80 applications instrumented within just a few months. And the team that I had at the time was made up of a manager who did a great job at being what I always say is the right level of pushy, and two guys that really took on to the product really quickly and really well, and what they did was amazing as well. We got all of those apps instrumented by just the two of them in a very short period of time. Now, the methodology that we used to instrument was really about getting the most visibility to get people interested and build the excitement around AppD, because we wanted to, again, to avoid this idea of shelfware. So we started with one of our most complex environments, one of our most highly visible environments, so that we could provide a solid proving ground for the tool. Fortunate for us, that worked out really well, and people immediately started seeing the AppD value. And what we started then was a pretty long line outside of my door and outside of my team's doors to get other apps instrumented. From there, because we started getting this queue of people, we had to start prioritizing these requests. And we also wanted to minimize the amount of time we were required to take from a developer. So Sarah and her team worked on developing not only an intake process that was based on prioritizing apps by their criticality to our business, but also a process that designed a very minimum amount of input from the developer. They met with them, talked about what AppD did, got some architectural information about the application, instrumented, and then came back and they went over it. And that worked really well, and it's still working today. From there, we also, because we were the true experts at that point and about the only experts in AppD at that point, we spent a lot of time on incident calls to help walk teams through what we were seeing to help build adoption there as well. And then from there, we started this approach that Sarah and I came up with, a concept of calling it guerrilla marketing, where you really couldn't walk by us and not hear about AppD. Some would argue that you still can't hear me walk down the street without talking about AppD. Don't work for them, by the way, despite popular belief. But we wanted to build adoption that would make AppD part of the daily life. Something that development teams, our test and QA teams, and our production teams used every day to solve the problems that each of them faced. When we bought the product and signed up for our support agreements, one of the things we decided to do was go with a Train the Trainer program. And that Train the Trainer program allowed us to do a lot of in-house training that then in turn helped improve that adoption as well. People were no longer afraid of the tool or were skeptical about the tool as much because we trained them on how to use it and made them solid users of it, and that's worked out really well. We also rolled out an Ask the Expert program so that those people who were really into it, who wanted to build their confidence, were able to come in on a Friday during lunch and talk through, how do I do this? This is what I'm seeing, am I reading this right? And it also gave us an opportunity to answer questions for those who may be a little bit of a detractor in the value of AppD, so that worked out a lot. And lastly, we began operationalizing the product. When I went to my CIO and asked her for the funding for this product, one of the first things she looked at me and said was, how are you going to operationalize this? So it was really important for me to understand a plan for operationalizing this. We did that with a lot of out-of-the-box functionality, quite frankly, but we used built-in health rule violation capabilities and provided a lot of proactive monitoring. In the beginning, we did a lot of work on those incident calls, as I said, and then worked into a more proactive alerting in our command center using out-of-the-box baselines. And then finally, we started experimenting some with Business IQ to understand business impact and exploring other ways of using it, including some post-mortem problem analysis to really validate that the business impact we thought was there. And then the result has been really positive for us. Our MTTR is down considerably. Our flight delays are down considerably. Every flight delay is attributed to a division within the company based on why the flight was delayed. Technology certainly had its share at times, and we've seen about a 27% reduction in flight delays for technology over the last year. But this has also made a difference in our employees and our customers. Our employees are no longer fighting with slow applications or applications that are failing at the gates when their real goal is to be there to help you as a customer. Same with our agents on the phones that are working with you. It's not only helped improve our stability and reliability with our employees, it's allowed them to then focus on you guys as the customers. And we continue to make those improvements so that all of our customers see improvements throughout their travel journey as well. Now we're moving beyond this initial instrumentation now. We've had the product in for quite a while, and we're working now to provide even more proactive notifications that continue to drive that MTTR down. In one of our most complex environments, actually the one we first started with, we have driven MTTR down by 40% in the diagnosis phase. Our QA team, again, has become heavy users. And we now are beginning to build an APM team that's there to work with developers almost as a COE to help them identify those no impact or low impact performance issues that are creating challenges but are not typically reported by, say, an end user. And we've also improved overall application health reporting through error reduction that really previously clouded our ability to understand what was going on in the app. And then we're going to continue to do this expansion of AppD. We're adding additional instrumentation. We're continuing to instrument the remaining number of our business-critical apps. And we're adding insights into server and platform visibility so that we can drive the correlation between when something like we run out of file system space or we run hot on a CPU, that we can really drive how that correlates to not only an impact on the application, but an impact to our customer. So thanks. That's it. That's all I had for you, but I just wanted to share the journey that we had from a bottleneck to, as we move into a more mature state, a COE really for our app development team and a catalyst for a move to DevOps. Thank you.